am Monica, 26 years old, and I work as a web designer. Growing up in a small rural town with my grandparents, parents, and younger sister Linda, life was far from fair. My sister, 7 years my junior, was the apple of everyone's eye. Her opinions were always prioritized, leaving me feeling neglected and unimportant. The favoritism was blatant. On Linda's birthdays, she received lavish gifts, while mine, close to Christmas, were combined into a single occasion, marked with practical gifts like books I had no interest in. When Linda started playing soccer, our parents were her biggest supporters, never missing a game or practice. In contrast, when I played my final tennis match in middle school, they were too busy driving Linda somewhere to attend. This pattern of disparity defined my childhood, fostering a growing sense of inadequacy and loneliness. Still, Linda wasn't blind to the injustice. She often stood up for me when our parents compared us harshly. "Monica is good at studying and teaching. She can do anything," she'd say. After my last tennis match, she even handed me a bouquet of flowers she had picked herself, whispering, "Good job." Our grandparents, too, tried to intervene on my behalf, reprimanding my parents for their behavior. But when my grandmother passed away, and soon after my grandfather, any buffer against my parents' criticism dissolved. Linda continued to support me for a while, but as my mother began targeting her with the same harshness, she eventually stopped. "If you're always going to side with your sister, you might as well stand outside too," my mother would sneer. To protect Linda, I told her to stop defending me. From then on, Linda focused on excelling in sports and academics, becoming the daughter my parents could proudly praise. Meanwhile, our parents' finances took a hit after the funerals, and they informed me there was no money for college. My dream of studying design at university was crushed. Instead, I graduated high school and took a job at a small design company far from home. There, I worked tirelessly, starting as an office assistant, but seizing every opportunity to learn from the designers. My passion for web design kept me going, and I spent weekends studying online courses to build my skills. 3 years later, I was promoted to the design team, and 5 years after that, I became a full-fledged web designer, trusted with leading projects. During this time, I rarely returned home. Visiting only brought back the sting of my parents' disapproval, so I focused entirely on my career. 8 years after high school, I received unexpected news. Linda was preparing for university entrance exams, aiming for a prestigious medical school in the city. Despite everything, I felt proud of her. When she was accepted into her first-choice school, I congratulated her warmly. "Linda, congratulations. You've worked so hard, and I admire your dedication." She thanked me, her voice tinged with embarrassment, but soon revealed a concern. The school suggested a donation. "It's not mandatory, but Mom and Dad are worried about how it would look if we don't contribute. With tuition and living expenses already being so high, they don't know what to do." Linda planned to cover her living expenses with part-time work, but I could see the strain medical school would impose. My parents, unable to afford the donation, had pushed Linda to ask me instead of approaching me themselves. Their audacity left me stunned. Even though I resented their actions, I couldn't ignore Linda's predicament. I decided to support my sister, covering the donation and entrance fees so she could begin her new life at university. Linda moved into an apartment near the campus, and since it wasn't far from where I lived, I thought she could rely on me if she ever needed help. However, as she became immersed in college life, her responses to me grew increasingly curt. I'd get messages like, "I want to eat this," or "I need this. Please buy it for me," and I would arrange whatever she needed, supporting her in ways she couldn't ask of our parents. Occasionally, we'd meet for a meal, but even then, she remained distant, engrossed in her smartphone rather than engaging with me. When I tried to talk about her studies or lighten the mood, she'd brush me off, complaining that studying was hard. Her demeanor left me bewildered. At one such dinner, I tried to steer the conversation with a light-hearted comment. "Mom and Dad probably only care about you, though," I said, smiling. But Linda suddenly stared at me with an icy expression and snorted. "Of course, a medical student like me and a high school graduate designer like you are incomparable. No one cares about a job that doesn't even need qualifications like yours." Her words felt like a slap. "There's no need to say it like that," I replied. Stunned, Linda rolled her eyes. "It's the truth. Being a designer is just a title. Anyone can make a website if they look it up online. You'd probably be better off getting a real qualification, but that's hard for someone who only graduated high school. I tried to defend myself. It's not that simple. I'm studying and working hard every day. You shouldn't judge without understanding. Linda dismissed me with a displeased glance and clicked her tongue. Dad and Mom are right. They say you're a disappointment. Someone who couldn't even go to college. I'm only here because they told me to watch over you and make sure you don't fall any lower. I froze, her words sinking in like stones. Memories of my parents comparing us since childhood rushed back. Linda is smart, kind, and dependable, while Monica is stupid, clumsy, and can't do anything. I lowered my head, feeling like I couldn't breathe. Seeing me bow my head, Linda mistook my silence for tears and smirked. I'm going home now, she said briskly and left. Living on her own had transformed Linda. Surrounded by exceptional people and showered with praise from our parents, she fully believed in the image they painted of her as a prodigy destined to be a top doctor. Meanwhile, their disdain for me was reflected in her tone and attitude, as though she had absorbed their judgment entirely. That winter, as usual, I returned home for the holidays. My parents had asked me to come back with Linda, who hadn't visited since starting university. When we arrived, it was clear who the focus of their attention was. The table was piled high with steak, pizza, and treats to celebrate her visit. That evening, neighbors, relatives, and even Linda's old classmates gathered for a grand party. Linda basked in the attention, boasting loudly about her life at university. Mom keeps asking me to come home more often, but you know how tough it is at the country's most prestigious medical school. I can't just leave my team projects or relax at home. People are always contacting me about something, and it's exhausting. I busied myself in the kitchen, avoiding the spotlight, but I could hear her voice dominating the conversation. To the parents and relatives, her boasting seemed fine, but to the neighbors and classmates, it must have sounded grating. When I brought out a tray of wine, an elderly neighbor tried to shift the attention to me. Monica, aren't you working in design? Before I could respond, Linda and my parents cut in. You can't really say much about her. She's trying, but she didn't even go to college. She's such a disappointment, my mother said bluntly. The room fell awkwardly silent. Many of those present hadn't gone to college themselves and were raising families or working hard, but they refrained from contradicting her. Only my parents and Linda seemed oblivious to the discomfort. Feeling humiliated, I tried to slip away, but Linda stopped me. You still come home a lot, don't you, Monica? I guess you don't think about anything. Maybe that's why you're so bold, she said, laughing loudly. Our parents joined in, laughing as if it was all a joke. If you say that much, Linda, it'll hurt her feelings. Poor Monica, my father added mockingly. My anger boiled over. I eyed my fists and managed to squeeze out. It's better if I don't come back next year. I get it. Relatives and neighbors looked at me with concern, but I ignored them, putting down the tray and grabbing my coat and bag. Linda smirked as I prepared to leave. I understand, don't bother coming back again, she said with a wave, and my parents echoed her sentiment with casual indifference. Heart pounding with anger and sorrow, I stepped out into the cold night, leaving behind the people who had so thoroughly dismissed me. I didn't look back. As I headed to the station, I fought to suppress the storm of emotions swirling within me. Returning home always left me with a heavy heart. When I was aspiring to be a web designer, I could use my studies as an excuse to distance myself from my parents, but as I grew older and advanced in my career, I found it harder to sever ties completely. The lingering sense of familial obligation weighed on me, even as I struggled to reconcile the disappointment and anger I felt toward them. Linda was still a university student, young and inexperienced in the realities of working life. Perhaps that's why she couldn't grasp how much effort it took to navigate society independently. I told myself that our parents had likely done their best in their own way to raise their children. Still, it was undeniable that they had spent years putting Linda on a pedestal, praising her as a genius while adopting a condescending attitude toward me. That winter, Linda's terrible behavior during our family gathering solidified my resolve. I realized that if I truly valued my own work and self-respect, I couldn't continue this toxic relationship even with my own family. It was in that moment I decided to cut ties for good. Months passed after that decision. One day, I received an unexpected call from Linda. When I didn't answer, she persistently left messages, urging me to pick up. Reluctantly, I finally answered. Did you pay my tuition properly? Linda's voice carried a mixture of urgency and entitlement. I responded calmly. I had the donation and the entrance fee before you enrolled. What about this year's tuition? The university is asking for it urgently. She replied, I don't know anything about that. I said. Even over the phone, I could sense Linda's discomfort. Indeed, I had drained my savings to cover her initial costs, the entrance fee, donation, and tuition for her first year. Those expenses had almost depleted my finances at the time, and I planned to pay subsequent fees as they came due. But after the incident at the end of the year, it was inconceivable that they would expect me to continue supporting Linda, especially after being told not to come home. I paid the donation because I wanted to support you, I said firmly. Didn't Mom and Dad send you to an out-of-state private university because they could afford the tuition? Or did they do it knowing they didn't have the money? That's not it, Linda stammered. I have wealthy friends, so there are other expenses besides tuition and living costs. Mom and Dad somehow managed those, but now they don't have the money for tuition. That's why they told me to contact you. It all made sense. My parents had likely counted on my financial support from the start, especially after I advanced in my career. I had moved to a major design firm, where my skills were recognized, and my salary had increased significantly. While I had saved diligently, my support for Linda was meant to be temporary, not a permanent obligation. From the sound of it, the savings meant for her education had been squandered on her leisure activities. Despite this, I no longer had the emotional capacity to forgive. Helping with the tuition wouldn't have been financially difficult, but I refused. A few days later, my parents called, demanding I pay Linda's tuition. Their accusatory tone only deepened my resentment. It was clear that they didn't see me as part of the family, only as a source of money. Their lack of respect and consultation made it impossible for me to comply. Linda began calling almost daily. Her messages were filled with self-centered pleas. Please pay the tuition. If you don't, I'll be expelled. Scholarships and part-time jobs aren't enough. It would be a waste if someone as promising as me had to leave school. I'll pay you back when I start working. Just help me as family. She even left absurd messages like, if you're upset because they told you not to come home, I can try persuading Mom and Dad. I saved her messages in a separate file, then deleted everything else and blocked her number. No one deserves to be treated as a doormat just because they're family. After that, I completely cut off communication with them. A relative later told me that Linda managed to secure scholarships and loans to cover her second year's tuition. However, without financial support for living expenses, she had to work part-time. Balancing work with her studies proved too difficult, and she ended up failing several courses. Eventually, she dropped out of university altogether. With no other options, Linda returned to live with our parents, but with their finances drained, there was no money to consider transferring her to another school. She didn't seek work locally, either. Instead, she became reclusive, spending her days immersed in video games and lashing out at night in fits of stress. A friend who lived nearby later told me that the sounds of family arguments could be heard regularly from their house. My parents, once so proud of Linda, seemed powerless to confront her. As time went on, things only worsened. My father, under immense stress, caused a scandal while commuting to work. He was accused of groping a woman on the train, and though the case was settled without charges, he resigned in shame. My mother, who had little work experience, struggled to find a job that could sustain the family. They occasionally tried to contact me through relatives, but their messages were always the same, demanding and unapologetic. Eventually, even the relatives lost patience. We'll handle it here. Don't worry, they told me, cutting off any further attempts at communication. I heard through the grapevine that Linda and my father, both unemployed, were living in near destitution. My mother, frustrated and overwhelmed, had disappeared entirely, leaving them to fend for themselves. Without any goodwill left in the neighborhood, help from others was non-existent. Meanwhile, my life had taken a different path. My career as a designer flourished. I was invited to join a major project that would leave my name known in the industry. With the project wrapping up and my savings secure, I decided to pursue a long-held dream, taking university entrance exams. Now, I plan to study business management with the goal of going independent in the future. For the first time in years, my heart is racing with excitement for the challenges ahead.